Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, A-L-I-V-E, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am excited to be here today to talk about raising your performance while short-circuiting burnout. And I have an amazing guest, Dominick Quartuccio. Dominick, welcome.
Thank you, Shayna. You sound sultry today, by the way.
I do. Yes, I have a little bit of a cold, so we're taking the sultry route today.
Yeah, it sounds good on you.
Thank you. So, I love that you work with high-performing men and actually support them to raise their performance, but at the same time, your attention is on not burning out, and not taking themselves over the edge or pushing themselves so far that they lose themselves or they become ill or, all those things that can really take a man off of his game. So I appreciate that you do that. And let me give you a quick intro before we dive in and then we'll talk about how you do it. So, Dominick's an energetic and innovative thought leader who's driven by guiding others to achieve the best version of themselves. And for 15 years, he walked his own successful path as a corporate business leader with Prudential. So his background is in sales and sales leadership. And most recently, he was responsible for running the East Coast sales team for Prudential Retirement and owning a $1.4 billion annual sales goal. So it's pretty impressive. And, in a way, you were seen as an entrepreneur inside of a Fortune 100 organization, which I think is really interesting because you're in the corporate world and yet you're also getting to make your own way, if that makes sense, right? So you're getting to, I don't know. It's like, I imagine you tell me that you are not under, in some ways, the thumb of some of the corporations. And so you can actually choose, how you're going to do this to have your life be what you want it to be, not just be working. Does that make sense? Is that true?
Yeah. So a little bit additional context too. When I was at Prudential for those 15 years, I left in February of 2016, but for those 15 years, Prudential was an amazing organization that allowed me to spread my wings and be that entrepreneur. Like they allowed me to create and design my own sales team from scratch, and next generation developmental sales team.
Nice.
Was able to travel to LinkedIn and Facebook and Google's headquarters to work with them on marketing strategies.
Wow.
So they knew that I always had that spirit and passion. But when I chose to leave 2.5 years ago to start the company that I run now, which is my own business in speaking and training and authorship in these arenas that you're talking about, helping men and women raise their performance without, while short-circuiting burnout. People are asked now to do way more than they ever have been.
Yes.
Every single year. Like the demands on people are going up.
It's exponential, it seems like.
Exponential. And Shayna, this because you work so intimately with people, but the big challenge is when you, and these people are meeting their objectives, right? And I do a lot of work with folks in the financial services arena and the hedge fund space and the banking space, investment management companies. And these are all people who are actually hitting their numbers. But when they confide in me in their private moments, they will tell me that they're kind of dying a little bit inside.
It's killing them. Yeah.
And the one strategy that they are employing is sacrifice. Right? They're sacrificing their personal, like one of three things I've found: their personal health, physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual,
Yeah.
their personal relationships.
Yeah.
So their partners, their spouses, their kids, their friends, their family, or they're sacrificing their personal freedoms.
Yeah.
Like being able to take a vacation and not have the email connected, or not to check it every morning or every night just to see if something, like to actually be able to truly disconnect, or to write that book, or to pick up a skill in their hobby time. There's no such thing as hobby time anymore.
Right. Hobby time. What's that?
Right. And it's breaking, Shane. Like
Yeah.
I saw a study by Willis Towers Watson. It was one of the most reputable consulting firms. They came out with their 2017 Global Attitude Survey, surveying 31,000 white collar professionals in 2017. 3 out of 10 experienced severe stress, anxiety, or depression over the last 2 years.
Wow.
30% of these workforces, like that
and I would imagine there's even more, right? I imagine that's like, in some ways, anytime you do a study and you ask for things like that, there's more people than actually report.
Oh, no question. And by the way, that's just severe stress, anxiety.
Right,
what about moderate stress? Like everyone's.
Yes. People think these days that actually stress is normal. I remember my mom saying actually years ago, like when I was younger, we didn't say that we were stressed out. And actually, she's like, I don't think we were as much. I think it's like you said, it's growing every year. There's more expectations, and now it's become this baseline of stress is okay. Stress is normal versus, hey, this is something to pay attention to, that, we're not treating ourselves well.
Yeah. Stress is chronic. And here's what I found with high performers is that when given the option to relax or to wind down or to actually like have a Saturday where they don't connect, they go crazy because they don't know what to do at that time, and they feel guilty. They feel like, oh my God, I'm not getting things done. They know how much needs to get done. They're like, oh my God, I'm not being productive. And what's actually happening is that stress has become the fuel that they run on.
Yes.
And without that fuel, without the stress, then it creates a panic, or they worry about like being, becoming lazy. If I don't rely on fear, which is, stress is a byproduct of it, then will I just be like a lazy SOB sitting on a couch or sleeping in, hitting the snooze alarm like 3 or 4 times. And
and I'm so curious how you work with men, because, I see this as well. What do you do to short circuit or prevent burnout when you notice, when you see, wow, hey, you are using stress, you haven't taken a vacation in 6 years, or you're not spending time with your family? Like, how do you actually support them while also helping them raise or better their performance?
Yeah, the first thing is that many of the men we're talking about don't actually believe that there's a problem. Right? So most of the men like won't listen unless like a Mack truck hits them, like a heart attack, or a spouse saying, I'm going to leave you, or something. Like they will ignore all sorts of signs. Yeah. But really the first step that I take is to assure them that I'm here to help you get better, like to increase your performance, not to like my first goal is not to make you relax or to take you off your game. It's like, no. Like that big job that you want, or that money that you want, or that, that lifestyle that you want, or that family time that you want, whatever is important to you, like we're going to go get that.
That's what we're doing here.
Yes. Like make no mistake about that. But to get there, you have to start to you have to be open to the possibility that how you're doing it right now is not the optimal way.
Yes, exactly. It's not the way that you're actually going to get there.
Yeah. And so maybe just a quick context for some of the people that I work with now, and then we'll share some, maybe we could dive in wherever you think, from a corporate perspective. Let's just say I work with a Fortune 100 organization and a team of 8 people who manage 1,000 people who are responsible for $1 billion in revenue, right? So like these are men and women who have a massive goal, and they have a big sales goal to hit, and they also have a big expense reduction to hit over the next year. Massive responsibility. I work with a hedge fund that has a sales team of 10 individuals who are responsible for selling a fund that is in the bottom quartile of performance. That's hard.
Wow.
And then I've worked with, and I'm not working with this company presently, but from an entrepreneurial standpoint, a company that developed an online meditation app for pregnant and expecting mothers, and has to raise money for seed funding, and has had their successful first round of funding. So running the gamut of entrepreneurs to mid-size organizations to large-scale organizations, like the problems are the same.
Interesting.
There's probably 10%.
Business-wise or personally or both?
Yeah, it's mostly personally. So like the businesses each have their own nuances, but at like the essence, Shayna, like each person is responsible for like an unreasonable goal.
Yes.
And they're responsible for delivering results with a speed that's never been seen before, and it has to be done in a sustainable way. So results, speed, and sustainability, and you can't get 2 out of 3. All 3 you cannot deliver a quarter too late. The results sustainably. If it's late by a quarter, like you may have missed your funding, you may have missed the market or the investor call. You have to have all 3, and people are feeling it. And like I said, they're rising to the occasion, but at the sacrifice of some really personal stuff.
So interesting. I can feel it as you're talking. I can feel like the stress building in my own body. And, and then there's this,
Sorry.
what I appreciate. No, it's okay. What I appreciate is without setting goals like these, well, it's a good question, actually. I was going to say, without setting goals like these, we may not reach or strive for the next thing, right? If someone sets a goal and believes in us and says, I'm putting this out there and it's unreasonable, but I think you can do it, or I'm just holding that it's possible, right? We can step up into that. And sometimes without that doesn't happen. But as you're saying, it sounds like it's happening for a lot of people, with a big sacrifice.
Right on. And I don't think I really ever thoroughly answered the question you asked before, which is like, okay, what do we do then? And how do we get these people to listen? And so we do want to continue striving. Otherwise we'd be bored with our future. So let's raise the stakes, but let's be clear. And let's be clear that we are going to continue climbing. But if you're not getting the results you want, or you're starting to feel like there's a breaking point coming, or you're losing your fire because it's just like, is this worth it anymore? I see the game. I write about this in my book. There's a 3-step process that I take people through. I call it the ADD process. And it's awakening, disrupting, and then designing. So my book is called Design Your Future, Stop Drifting and Start Living. The awakening stage is, think of it as awareness plus action. Awareness in and of itself is not enough, right? So it's like, oh, I'm aware that I have an addiction to my phone and I should be spending less time on it. But like most people never take action. The awakening is that tipping point where it's like, holy like I need to like to do something differently. Yeah. And so until someone feels I can't sustain because I'm going to have a heart attack, or I can't sustain because it just doesn't feel good to me anymore. I can't sustain because my wife or my girlfriend never sees me and I'm losing her. That's the awakening moment. Yeah. That can cause you to say, okay, it's time to take action. The disrupting stage is just basically, we are a series of patterns and habits, right? Like 95% of what we think, feel, and do falls below our conscious detection. Yeah. And if you're a high performing person, then chances are a lot of your habits and patterns have gotten you, are high performing. That's why you're here.
They've gotten you where you are.
Right on. But it's also the thing that puts that ceiling above your head that you keep bumping into. And you probably see this with a lot of men, but like men and women, but being accessible, being responsive, and working harder than everyone else. These were things that probably got them to where they are, but those are things that are not scalable. Yes. Right? Like being accessible is not scalable because there's only one of you. Working harder, you can only work so much harder until there's no more hours left in the day, or you have no more gas left in the tank.
Right, or you have that heart attack.
Or you have that, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And by the way, you're up against now at the level of the organization or the business that you're running, like you are up against other super high performers, and that they're really sophisticated too. So you're not just competing against the average, you're competing against the best of the best. So it's like you got to think about doing things differently. If you are a 6-cylinder engine, you've probably been firing on 1 or 2 cylinders that have worked really well. To diminishing returns as you've accepted. Now it's like, what are those other cylinders? You won't be able to find them until you disrupt like what you're doing now.
And what do you often find? I mean, can you give us an example of, okay, what are the 2 cylinders? I mean, maybe you just gave an example, I think, of the 2 cylinders or 2 or 3 cylinders that people are often running on. And then what are the ones that are surprising that they don't necessarily know are there?
Yeah. So with men, I do a ton of work with them about their own emotional agility and fluency. So to a man, most men will come to me and be like, hey, I don't let my emotions get too high or too low. And they'll beam with pride as like, it's like, yes, like that is a skill because emotions are a liability.
Yes.
And yes, unhinged emotions are a liability. But what I find is if like I use this analogy of an emotional football field, like if you were to think of there's 100 yards in a field, the midpoint is a 50-yard line, which is, let's just say emotionally, that's neutral.
Yep.
And on one end of the spectrum, like on one extreme, it's like super positive emotions. The other extreme, super negative emotions. What most men have done have completely shrunk the field to like within a few feet of either, side of the 50-yard line because
and even calling them negative emotions or positive emotions, right? It's like that there is such a thing as negative emotions.
Right. So like what they would say is fear, failure, anger, like rage, and they'll use some of those things like to motivate, but like typically it's to try and stay as even as possible. And in the professional space, especially the place where I work with a lot of white collar businesses, it's very conservative. Yeah. And it's rewarded that you are kind of like emotionless. You're trustworthy if you don't bring your emotion. And what ends up happening is over a long period of time, I work with a lot of 40 or 50-year-olds who they win a lot, but they don't feel anything. Yeah. Because when you shrink the downside, like when you don't feel any of the harder emotions, you also limit feeling like the bliss. You don't want to indulge in it. And so it's like,
well, right. And then I think you and I probably both, see men who come to us and, women too, but who, like you said, either a partner's, saying, I'm out of here because I never see you, or you're not even available, or there's a heart attack, or something happens, or suddenly my kids are this age and I just realized I missed 10 years with them, and it is, I think one of those kind of secret or hidden cylinders. I'm curious what you think about this. In a lot of my work with kind of therapy, counseling, spirituality, yoga, all of those more maybe, I don't know, some of them are a little more Eastern, but some of them are Western psychology. But I've seen that the more we can actually feel the intensity of our emotions and expand to feel them, hold them, not have them, have us explode or react, but to actually respond from a really deep, present place, that actually has people be that much more, what's the word we want to use? I was going to say successful, but I think that's kind of an empty word in this case, but perform even better, connect even better, like sales increase and, connection and intimacy increases. So I'm curious if you find that too.
100%. And what I could boil it all down to is speed. So here's the thing, like I talked about before, like most leaders are responsible for results with speed and sustainably. And the fastest way to make decisions is when you get really in tune with your emotions. The fastest way you can resolve conflict with like your business partners or with the people that report to you or with your customers is to understand what you're feeling, because most people go to their head. And so I have a number of clients who are extraordinarily heady and they rely on their head and data. And like when they go into, say, a sales situation or a conflict situation, the way they work it out is I'm going to think about every possible scenario, every possible chess play. I'm going to work out every detail before I get in there, and therefore I'm protected. And that has served them. But number one, it's exhausting. Number two, it's time consuming. And number three, you're all like, there's going to be a scenario where you do not anticipate an outcome and you're thrown a curveball. And have you cultivated and curated an emotional agility and emotional fluency that allows you to be able to say, okay, like curveball, fear, I feel the fear, but I don't respond from the fear. Like I can handle that situation. One thing that I do, and I've been doing this for the past, let's say 5 or 6 months, I have a Monday night men's group, Shayna. I think we talked about this before, where every Monday night in New York City, these 8 guys, if you're in New York City, you're expected to be there. It's 7:30 to 9:30. And all we do is a practice around connecting to our feelings. Now that sounds really super soft. I get that. But like here again, like we're going back to performance and speed on this one. And we are, as men, we are such problem solvers. Something happens. We're like, let's solve that problem. If you feel upset, let's figure out a solution to make you not feel upset. It's like quickly pivot off that emotion as fast as possible. And the only emotion that most men are ever allowed to express is that of anger. It's cool to punch a wall or to break a dish or scream and get angry. Like other dudes allow you to do that. I think it's cool. It's actually a sign of manliness in many situations. But to experience insecurity or weakness or indecision or to ask for help, like these are all things that we're told to deal with on our own. Don't show it.
And it's interesting too how the mind can call them, insecurity, weakness, all of those things. And yet I imagine when you go in there, and what I work with men, and as you go in there and feel, right, it's not a label of something. That's our mind telling us that somehow we're bad or wrong for all the ways that we're supposed to live up to these expectations. And yet, as you're doing this feeling practice, you're actually getting more connected to your power and your strength and your clarity and your, intuition and all of those things, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, what you just called out was what we call stories. So it's like something happens, but then there's the story that we create, the meaning that we make of it. So it's like, we'll be in the room here and I'll say, last week I called I've been talking to this one company for 3 weeks and they keep pushing me off and rescheduling meetings. So what happened was they rescheduled a meeting, but the story I can make out of it is they're not taking me seriously, or they don't want to do business, or this guy is disorganized. I can make up all the story, which creates a whole other set of emotions. And what the men in the room will do is like, they'll be like, that's a story. What are you feeling? I'm feeling anger. Great. Where in your body do you feel it? I feel it like in my neck and the back of my shoulders. Is it great? Is it dull? Is it sharp? What else do you feel? Anxiousness. Where? In your stomach. And it's just like, there's no advice. There's no problem solving.
And what happens for you, like after you actually feel that and you're willing to go into that and you're guided into that? Because I can see for a lot of men listening, they'd be like, wow, what is the purpose of this? Right. So what actually happens for you?
When I first started doing this, Shayna, for the first few weeks, and I've done this practice for like, let's say 2 years, not consistent. No, I'm sorry. 4 or 5 years. I was introduced to this through the Mankind Project. And there's another group called the Everyman, and it's spelled strange, but it's Everyman Retreats. If you want to Google that, these are 2 places where you can go and learn this stuff. At first, and for the past 6 months, I've been doing a consistent Monday night practice. But at first, for me, I didn't feel much of anything. Because I was so adept at numbing my emotions and like I would intellectualize. Every answer would come from the head. And here's the amazing part about it, Shane, is the men in the room will be like, I don't feel you, dude. Because like they know when you're in your head. They're like, no. If I'm not moved, if I can't connect with you, or if I'm bored by what you're saying, it's because you're in your head. But like when the other men can't take their eyes off of you. And they can't stop listening to you, it's because you are in your body. Like they can feel that. What that does is, if you think about that, that is, you've now captivated. Now you know how to connect. And in the business setting, especially for people who are influencing others, you have to be able to connect and to captivate and to do it from an authentic place, not a manipulative one, but to feel what that's like, to just like be raw and vulnerable and see how everyone else is just like so in awe of you. You can bring that into anything.
It's so interesting. I work with this with men, and I call it the invisible factors or the invisible accelerators of success and of attraction, because it's actually really similar in the realms of business and in the realms of relationship, where, these things that seem like on the surface, men come to me and say, well, what should I say? Or when should I say it? Or how do I not seem needy? Or how do I,
Yeah.
seem more professional? And so often, I would say all the time, actually, like, it's not what you're saying, it's these invisible factors of how awake is your body and how connected are you to your emotions. And, are you actually coming from a place where you're touched and moved yourself? Right. So I just love that you're speaking to all of that. It feels like we're on the same page with that. And like you said,
Yeah.
that's what starts to captivate people. That's what has you walk into a room, whether it's a business meeting or, a potential date or partner or whatever, and have someone say, holy shit, I don't know what it is about that guy, but wow, I want to be around him. I trust him. I feel desire for him. It's amazing.
Shayna, it's amazing. I mean, some results that have occurred. I mean, these are tangible results that men that are listening to your podcast that can either connect to or not. But I recently secured a $150,000 contract without a proposal, and I put a proposal together after the fact so the organization could have it. But a $150,000 proposal based on the feeling that I was able to generate with the buyer.
Yes.
And actually, the reason I was able to land that contract, and at first it just started as a keynote speaking engagement, like a $10,000 speaking engagement that was supposed to start and stop at that. But I was able to, but I gave the leader feedback on his own performance that was really candid and a between the eyes shot that he responded to me and said, you know what? I have no one gives me that feedback anymore at this level, and that's a problem. Yes. What do you have for me?
Yes.
That opened the conversation. And then through like a handful of like dinners and other conversations, that's where the contract got knocked down. How about with women? Perfect example. I'm a single man. I met a beautiful woman Friday at this like outdoor dance party. We hit it off, got her phone number. Chemistry was high that night. And then in the follow-up, she was just kind of like aloof, slow to respond. We were making plans, but didn't seem like, it seemed like it was heading towards a flake out.
Yeah.
And I could feel, I was like, I don't want to let go of this because she seems awesome. But at the same time, I'm not like, I don't stand for this either. Right. Yeah. There's more that I would expect. And this, if we start off this way, it's not going to end up in a great place. So I wrote her a text and I said, hey, listen, when I met you on Friday night, I was like captivated and connected with you. But in the days following, our communication has been distant and disjointed. And tomorrow night is not really going to work for me anymore. So I said, tomorrow night we're supposed to get together, but that's not going to work for me anymore. It was awesome meeting you. Thanks for the great dance. Good luck, Dominick. And she texts me back 3 minutes later. Hey, I totally understand. I'm sorry. Can you talk? And so we, I couldn't talk in that moment, but we ended up speaking last night for about an hour. And she was so like, that's cool. Like, thank you. I get it. I was totally aloof.
Willing to actually say it, not just go along with it, to just try to get her there and not in the scarcity of, okay, well, I should just take what I can get here. Right. It's like, you respect yourself enough and this is what I'm seeing. Like, I want a kind of interaction, a depth, connection, and I'm not going to settle. I see a lot of men settling, whether it's business or love or sex or whatever. It's like, okay, well, I'll just, kind of take what I can get so that I don't risk losing it.
Right on. And that losing it, the attachment, like 5 years ago, this woman I may have been attached to. And so like I may have done the same thing that I did, but I would have been rolling the dice, hoping that she would have been like, that it would have turned out the way that it did. And if it didn't, then I would have been pissed off or upset, or I would have lamented. In this situation, I was like truly at ease with, hey, if she walks away, then I just dodged a bullet. Right. Because like she just, like this wasn't right. But the
Well, and then
only way I was
also,
able
I
to,
just want to say for some men listening too,
yeah.
my guess, you tell me if this is true. It's not like you might not have been disappointed. So I don't want to go into like that numb state again, like, oh, I'm cool, whatever, no matter what. Right? You might have some feelings about it, but it sounds to me like your integrity with yourself, is the most important part there.
Yeah, yeah. So to be real precise, there would have been disappointment that wow, what seemed to have so much promise
Yes.
turned out to not be, and that's disappointing.
Yeah.
And not to definitely not to step over that feeling, because that's what a lot of men do, right? Or quickly pivot to someone else that can make you forget about that.
Yeah.
Versus like processing the feeling. But the only reason why I would have been able to cycle through that so quickly is because I've done this work that's gotten me to a state where, like you just said, Shayna, that my integrity on what I accept and like who I allow into my space, and the way that I allow myself to be treated has gotten to such a place where if she truly could not meet me on that level, then there would be very little sense of loss.
Yeah. And I'm curious too. I mean, I think sex is often a really concrete way for men to see some of this, and women too. I'm curious in a way what happens when men who are what you've seen, or if you've seen as you've been working with men in business too, if they come to you and say anything about what's going on in their marriage, their relationships, because I think that settling can often happen even more in a marriage because there's so much at stake, right? We've got kids, we've got family, we've got a house, we've got all these things. And yeah, so I'm kind of curious about the overlap. You and I have talked about this a little bit, but the overlap between performance and being a high performing at work and then a man's romantic or sex life that you've seen.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so much we can go into here, but I guess the first contextual standpoint is I will be responding to this primarily from the heterosexual male's perspective, because that's what I am and that's my experience.
Yeah.
It's funny, like all of the men that I've worked with, like they never upfront bring their relationship life into the fold. Like, it's always, how can I get better at work? How can I get better at managing my time? How can I make more money? The next career thing? How can I start my business? Or how can I elevate this business? And it's inevitable that we're eventually going to end up in their sex lives and their relationship lives. But most men are just like, have been taught and so ingrained to just deal with that on their own.
Yes.
And that, and even asking for guidance on that hits to the very heart of their identity and masculinity. And they feel weak and they feel, effeminate if they have to ask for it. And it's like the furthest thing from the truth.
Totally right. It just breaks my heart because it's so far from the truth.
Yeah. And most of the men that I end up working with are just like me, where we've all spent an inordinate amount of our life's energy trying to become more attractive to women.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like I learned how to dress because it made me more attractive to women. I started working out after I finished playing sports. I only worked out to support my sports. But then when I got, when I was in the real working world, I started working out because I wanted to look good for women. Right. And I learned how to talk and act and be, have game. And I got the job. I made money, not because I loved what I was doing, but because it was like, that's what makes me more attractive to provide for someone who's going to come into my life. Like my whole life was engineered around this stuff. Yeah. Engineered around becoming more attractive to women. And yet what ends up happening is the stresses of life that we accumulate in that process, at the same time that men have very little idea on how to navigate or to engage with their own emotions. The one guaranteed pressure release valve is dangling between their legs, right? That's a good way to put it. It's like this potential weapon of mass destruction. And like we're given the launch code, like we actually stumble upon the launch codes at a very early age through masturbation or other forms of maybe interacting with someone else their age. But we're not really given any guidance or supervision or advice.
It's crazy, right? It's like to have a weapon of mass destruction or mass creation, right? I mean, it's both in a way, which which could overlap each other, right? But then like no manual, no guidance, no support. And yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, what I've found in some of the work that I've been doing is that most men, at least the ones that I've worked with, discovered masturbation. I would say 85% of the men that I polled,
Yeah.
Primarily white heterosexual men, about 75% white heterosexual men, and they discovered masturbation between the ages of 10 and 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them didn't have sex for many years later.
Yeah.
So you're talking about, in some cases, like 10 years of private self-stimulation, or maybe like 1 year or anywhere in between before they engage
Before
in another.
even having, right, with another person before having sex. Yeah.
Correct. And it's typically done in secrecy and in isolation. You're supposed to hide it. And if like porn was involved, that's not supposed to be exposed. You like the whole beginnings of the sexual exploration with self is silence, secrecy, and either conscious or unconscious shame.
Yes.
So conscious shame could be in the form of like religion. I know I'm not supposed to do this. I'm going to go to hell, or I'm killing kittens every time I masturbate and explode. It's like, like there's that, but then there's this unconscious shame of maybe you're watching certain pornography that you're like, I don't know if this is like, if anyone were to find out about it, my identity could be destroyed.
Yes.
Right.
Well, right. Okay. And I'm curious, I mean, I think we could have a part 2 of this conversation, but for now I'm curious how this ties in to performance or what you see, right? Because you get to see these inner workings that I think most people don't ever see. And for the men listening, maybe they've never really had a conversation with another man who's admitted this or seen this in other men. So, right. I mean, I'm not even sure what question to ask. It's like what's important about this?
Yeah, that's the question.
Life and well-being. What's
important about this, right? So the reason why it's important to understand your origins is because you then go a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades later of all these behaviors, all of these instances of masturbation and chasing women and sex and pornography escalation, and then you find yourself at present day. Mm-hmm. And you are surrounded by stress and responsibilities. Yeah. And you don't know how to modulate, how to engage with your emotions. And so it can feel like you are one shook up bottle of Coca-Cola. Yes. Without like a top coming off. And the one place that's guaranteed to provide a salve, a release, a blissful state is sex, porn, and masturbation. Right. And let's just use a married man for an example. And married men, I work with a lot of them who bring these challenges to me. So like I'm thinking of one man specifically, been married for 12 years, loves his wife, 2 beautiful daughters, would never cheat on her, never has cheated on her. And yet, their sex life is underwhelming. Yeah. And he's in a stressful situation. And listen, like even if he and his wife wanted to have more sex, they are extremely busy. Yes. And for them to find like overlapping time, opportunity where they're both excited and turned on, and like even in matching the libidos, right? Yeah. So the libidos have to match. They have to have free time, and the kids have to be in bed or away. It's like almost never when that happens. Yeah. But it's so easy to walk into the bathroom and pull up your iPad and pick up the porn that you wanted, which you can look at 30 different sites within 15 minutes or way less than that and get the job done. There's no judgment on what you're watching. There's like it's over and done as fast as you would like it, and it changes your state. Right. And I was just going to say, I mean, I think this is where it goes back to where we started, right? It's like I'm kind of wanting to tie it back to this performance piece and the burnout piece and this place where it's like there's just a release of energy or a release of stress, but there's nothing being built there, right? Like the intimacy, the connection, the opening to states that are blissful or super ordinary or spiritual or connected or whatever you want to call it, that are possible, that you and I know are possible.
it's like throwing out this incredible this energy that's a force for good. I don't want to say masturbation is bad or wrong, but there's a way of engaging with it that seems like, throwing it out, energy that could be used to perform even, I would say, even better, or to have an even better life that feels more meaningful while being a high performer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Because I've done that. I've taken long stints off of masturbation and pornography for 4 years, which sounds crazy. And guess what? It is crazy. And I'm not advocating that you do that, but I've learned a lot of things from having gone through no masturbation nor pornography for 4 years. I'm back on the sauce now too. And I can tell you that I've re-engaged with it in a way that's like much healthier with my own command and like in the way that you're talking about. But like in that moment, there's nothing that makes more sense than to just drop your pants and like get after it, because it will do exactly what you need it to do in that moment, which is to provide the stress release. So you can get back to like the complex project, or to go back into your house where like screaming kids were going to make you like kill yourself, but now you can deal with it because you're like the edge is taken off. So in the moment, it's so seductive to go that route. But the problem is you do that multiple times over the course of weeks, months, years, decades.
Yeah.
Every moment you're drifting and your trajectory, it's kind of like a plane that just 1 degree right, 1 degree right, 1 degree. You're supposed to land in California. Now you're in Greenland. It's like, that's how it happens. And by going down that road, Shayna, what you end up doing is you lose motivation and energy to bring to the bigger things in life, like breathing it back into your relationship, or being bolder in work, or creating, because sex energy is your creative energy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. I think we should probably do a part 2. And I think, for time's sake, I want to start to wrap us up. What would you say, right? Like working with men and having such a window into not only work performance, but these issues and challenges and struggles that happen in intimacy and relationship. And like you said, this seemingly small turn, or this small choice, it seems like in the moment, in the short term, that then has such a massive effect long term, right? What do you want to leave men with?
Yeah, let's give them a few resources. And I'll do these in ascending order of, let's just say, level of action. Yeah. So if like you just want to take this on your own, 2 books that I could highly recommend to you would be The Way of the Superior Man by David Deida. And I think it's called A Spiritual Guide to Women, Sex, and Your Career. Mm-hmm. And if, by the way, if you're a guy who's not into the woo-woo, this is going to be a challenge for you. It's not heavily woo-woo. I read this like back when I was
expands woo-woo to not, but right, woo-woo to really intense.
Yes. And I would say hang it, because like that is one of the top 5 most I've read hundreds of books cover to cover. One of the top 5 most influential books I've ever read. And for men, it's a must.
Yeah. Though the only thing I want to say is having been in David Deida's world for many, many years, I've also experienced a lot of men who feel smaller or less than, or somehow insecure after reading that book. For others, that's not the case. But I just want to say that if that does happen, if you do pick up this book and that does happen, reach out. We can have a conversation, because I feel like I've actually walked a lot of men through those portals of where they get stuck in the shame or the doubt or whatever into their power.
Well, what you're talking about, Shane, is that most men will try and solve the problem on their own, and they'll read a book and then they'll go and try and figure it out. But if you've never been guided through leveling up, or if you've never had coaching before, if you've never been to a workshop before, like this is the stuff that's really hard to navigate on your own.
Yeah. So
like that experience that you just described, I'm not surprised it's happened.
Yeah.
The other book, Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, fantastic. Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich, which is one of only 15 books that has ever sold over 50 million copies.
Wow.
And most of those books are like The Hobbit or Harry Potter. It's like the only business book was Think and Grow Rich. But Outwitting the Devil is the one that I like better, because it talks about what would happen if you live your life in a state of drift, meaning like you think you're making conscious decisions, but it's really just your uninspected habits and patterns that take you off course, that leads you to a place where at the end of your life, you feel like you've left chips on the table.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, right? Because ultimately, isn't that what this is about? It's like people, I think, want to perform well, to have this kind of success, to feel like I've made it. And yet so many men I see, they either they've made it, they retire, they have a heart attack from working so hard, or they've made it and they get there and then they're like, well, this is empty actually. Where's the meaning? Where's the, where are the relationships? Like, I let all that go. So yeah, I'm glad you're bringing all of this together. It's so interesting too, right? To think about performance, to think about sex, to think about relationships and intimacy and meaning. And that's what I feel excited by, is where those all come together in this overlap.
Totally. And I suppose the last place I'll go, Shayna, is just, I've always found, and you probably experienced this as well, is that men get better when they're around other men who are striving to understand themselves better in a container where they're supporting each other and calling each other to a higher level. It's like reading a book is one thing. It's a way to get yourself started, to kind of familiarize yourself. Getting coaching is amazing. You get that one-on-one personal support and really nuanced, specific advice for yourself, which could highly recommend.
Yeah.
And that next level is where like you are around other guys who are doing the work too. It's like gasoline on fire.
Yeah.
And like the two groups I mentioned before, the Mankind Project, which has been around for decades, and then Everyman, which is newer. It's about a year and a half old. It's like EVRY.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. Yep. They leave out an E in there. And the men's group that I do every Monday night that I talked about before, we follow a lot of their guidelines with respect to the feelings and emotions practice.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being so, open and honest and able to talk about all of these different realms. It's often like, I'll talk with a man who does sex coaching or a man who does business coaching, and yet never the two shall meet, right? And I feel really passionate about the fact that there is this overlap, and for a man to feel truly alive, right? All of these things have to be fulfilling in his life, right? It can't just be one or the other, business or intimacy and sex, or love or sex. So thank you for being someone who's talking about it all, and then walking your talk and actually living from this really deep place.
Thank you, Shane. It's been a blast. And thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And we'll do part 2 soon.
Can't wait.
Okay.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.